Leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call the Commissioner. Put your calls to Cressida Dick now. 0345 6060 973. This is LBC.
It is indeed LBC. It's 3 minutes after 8 on Friday, December the 3rd, and it is, as they call the Commissioner, your opportunity to put the calls in the studio with me, Dame Cressida Dick, the Met Commissioner. Good to see you. I've seen you a lot on the TV this week, sadly for some very sad occasions as well, but it's good to have you here today. Can I just reflect on a story a couple of weeks ago? It was reported you hired dozens of officers in your complaints department to try and save your battered image after the Sarah Everard case. Around 50 more people were involved. We decided to commission some research with a company called JL Partners. It's a British polling council. We polled more than 1,000 people, and the question was, how much do you trust the Metropolitan Police? Commissioner, I have to tell you that just 51% of Londoners say they trust the Met, 23% say they distrust the Metropolitan Police, and when you break it down, and I will hand a copy to your colleagues when you depart, amongst women under 35, very much an area you want to address, Commissioner, 42% say they trust the Met, 33% say they distrust the Met. Commissioner, these are devastating figures. London does not seem to have much trust for your colleagues. Why?
Well, certainly I would like those figures to be much higher, obviously. And the first time I've heard those.
And we will pass it on.
You know, a poll of 1,000 people. Rest assured, we also, survey regularly, and I am watching this. I have to say, I do absolutely understand that in particular, but not exclusively, the murder of Sarah Everard by a serving police officer has absolutely damaged people's trust in us. That's something I regret. It isn't the only event this year where people have looked at what a very small number of my colleagues have been doing or alleged to have been doing and have really, really felt angry and upset about that. So you mentioned that I had talked about another 50, they've already arrived, investigators in our professional standards department.
How will they restore trust?
So they are part of...
Nearly half of London, 49%, only 49%. That's a shocking figure. 51% say they trust the Met, so 49 don't have full trust in the Met.
So our general figures, if I can put it like this, are normally, I'm saying, are up in about the 70s. And they've stayed... Let me finish, please, Nick. They've stayed up there for a considerable period of time. And I would just point out that is very, very, very much higher than many other, sadly, public servants. But if it is the case that your poll is representative and it has dropped to that, then that is a challenge. And that's why I'm doing a number of different things. I've mentioned the investigators. They're going to be looking at sexual offences alleged and domestic abuse alleged by my officers. We are responding, of course, to the non-statutory review that the Home Secretary has announced. We are working with Baroness Casey next year to look at all our standards, everything to do with our culture, how we treat each other. Okay. But Nick, you know my officers, and you've referred to them. The vast majority of them are good people, decent people with good values, doing a difficult job.
Well, let's turn from the LBC poll then.
Their trust has certainly been hit. There's no doubt about it.
51% of Londoners say. Let's refer you to figures you'll be aware of. This is the GLA MOPAC website, the so-called Public Voice Dashboard at London City Hall. Do police do a good job in the local area? March 2017, as you came in, 68%. September of this year, 52%. That's 16 percentage points down on your watch. Do you agree the police can be relied upon to be there when needed? 77% as you came in, 61% now, down 16%. Do the police treat everyone fairly, regardless of who they are? When you come in, 79%, now, or September, 68%, down 11%. It's fail, Commissioner.
I don't accept that. I don't like those figures. I absolutely...
I set out...
No, I'm not questioning them. I don't accept that it's the words you used. I set out as Commissioner for us to... And I want this police service to be, and so do my colleagues, the most trusted police service in the world. That's what we set out to do.
It's going backwards,
and we have we've done all sorts of things, and we are now pushing very, very hard, specifically in relation to the issues arising from the murder of Sarah and other bad behaviour by my colleagues. I've talked about some of it. The other thing I want to say is that we have launched a new plan around violence against women and girls, and you'll have seen a lot of publicity of all the different things that we are now doing, because we do recognise your point that women in particular need reassurance that we are there for them, we are delivering. I could reel off to you enormous numbers of successes and achievements this year by the Met. Am I content with those figures? Of course I'm not.
But they're on the slide. Every single figure.
Not every single figure, but the ones that you read out.
Do people listen to the concerns of local people? 76, now 64, down 12%. Agree police are dealing with things that matter to the community. It was 74% as you came in. It's 64% now. I don't want to be... Do you want me to go on, Commissioner?
No, I don't want to get into it sort of to and fro about the numbers. No,
they only go one way, Commissioner.
And I'm sorry to say, as I heard a prominent politician say yesterday, that is also true of all sorts of other public institutions. And for example, as you well know, politicians themselves have a trust rating usually under 20%. The public in general are less trusting of authority than they have been. I think that's playing in. But I don't deny for one second that, for example, the events last year when George Floyd was killed in America, that hit our confidence ratings very hard, the associated events after that. And this year, we have had the horrible, horrible murder of Sarah. So it's my job as Commissioner, with my team, to build that confidence back up.
We'll give you a full copy of our research. Let's
you.
get to the calls. Dame Cressida, thank you for that. Ian in Camden, you're through to the Commissioner. Go ahead. Morning, Ian.
Morning, Nick. Morning, Commissioner. We're hearing these terrible things this morning about this poor lad Arthur, and rightfully the public are asked to report any concerns that they have. And also, years ago, Jimmy Savile was able to get away with his crimes, even though people had inklings. Now, I've got issues regarding a Christmas party that went on 18th of December last year at Downing Street. Firstly, are you investigating this? Because there seems to have been a law breach.
Thank you for that, Ian. This is the allegations that's been contained in the Daily Mirror, that when we were under Tier 3 restrictions, I think it was, Commissioner, this time last year, there were two parties held within Number 10, a rather informal affair in late November and a more formal affair in December. It is believed Boris Johnson attended both. Angela Rayner has written, to Cabinet Secretary Simon Case, demanding Number 10 be investigated and the police be involved as to whether last year there were at least two breaches of the law. Commissioner.
So, Ian, you asked if we are investigating, and the answer to that is no. And as far as I am aware, we have had no complaint, and therefore I really can't comment on what did or didn't happen there.
What happens if this letter... What is normal form? Does the letter now come to you? Were Angela Rayner, the Labour politician, were she to write to you suggesting you and your colleagues take a look at it? Would you, if there's a potential abuse?
People write to me every day. I always read their letters. Of course I do.
So you
I can't say what there's no such thing as the normal form. If I get a letter, I'll read a letter, of course.
So you would look into this.
Nick,
if you...
I can't comment on what we would do afterwards. I can't comment on... because I don't know what the letter would say.
No, but the suggestion is that two parties... I mean, I'm sure you and your colleagues or your press team have told you, Boris Party broke COVID rules. Police might investigate. Are you going to investigate if you're given the details?
Nick, we're in the world of complete hypotheticals. I have not received a letter.
All right, I'll write you a letter now. I'm putting it to you now.
I cannot comment any further, and I'm not going to. I know you want to get a sort of a headline out of me that we're doing this or that or the other, but I don't know. Until I get the letter, I don't know what we're doing. I'll read it.
If it happened, he's not beyond the law if he sold a party last year, is he?
This is the Met. We are professional. We are impartial. We act without fear or favour. We follow evidence. That's what we do.
So if he has held a party, you'll have a look at it?
I will read the letter.
OK, Ian, thank you. Sandy in Sidcup. Oh, it's been busy down your part of the world. You just got a new MP. Sandy, go ahead. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
Right, my question quickly. Why don't I have the right to choose to wear a mask or not if it causes me harm or distress? Would I be fine?
Stay on the line, Sandy. All I need to say is the Commissioner does not make the law, or it's the politicians who make the laws. She and her colleagues, by the way, police forces up and down the land impose them. Can I just get you, do you think you should... Do you not wear a mask, if you don't mind me asking?
No, I don't. No, right. I don't have an exemption.
You don't have an exemption, you don't wear a mask. OK, that's quite a key point. Commissioner, what would you say to somebody who is... Now I can say, you don't impose the laws, of course, but this young woman is breaking the law. Commissioner?
Well, it actually depends what you're doing as to whether you may be breaking the law.
That's a fair point.
There are...
Do you ride the tube or the train or the bus or anything like that, Sandy?
No, I don't, no.
Do you go into stores?
I do go into stores.
Do you mask up then?
No. I haven't got... The thing is, Nick,
Go on.
Although I don't have a health problem, I have a mindset problem with it.
Right.
I truly am nervous about wearing a mask. I don't believe that they work.
Okay, well,
they make me feel uncomfortable.
Well, okay, well, I'm always happy to take the Commissioner into policing matters. It's not health matters and legislation is not fair. But, Commissioner, thank you for that, Sandy. A crackdown on passengers yesterday. I'm sure many of your colleagues were involved. 152 passengers fined, 125 thrown off transport. That might, of course, be the BTP. 5,000 told to cover up in one day. Your reaction to those figures, Commissioner?
Well, as you pointed out, because of the new variant, we have new restrictions, and they do require people, unless exempt, to wear a mask on public transport and in shops. My officers will go and assist the enforcement teams on buses and overland trains, potentially, and the BTP, as you say, primarily do the trains and the underground. We were the first in the Met to say that we weren't out there to, enforce, that we will always engage with people, we will always explain things, we will always encourage people to comply with the law and only use enforcement as the very last resort. So we're not patrolling shops, but if somebody, I'm sure this wouldn't be the case with you, but if somebody was in a shop not wearing a mask, they were challenged and it became a great big argument and there was likely disorder, then a police officer might be called. And it is potentially the case that if the person still refused to use and put the mask on, that they
But what's
would...
the drill? It presumably is going to ask you to put your mask on, sir or madam, and you ask a couple of, and then if you've just met with obstruction, you say, well, if you don't put your mask on, I'm going to have to nick you.
So we engage, we explain, we encourage as much as we possibly can. Police officers always have discretion, so it will depend on the circumstances, but as a last resort, absolutely, we enforce. We do see, we all wish we weren't in this situation, and obviously there are strong views on all sides, but there is a law. It is our job to uphold laws, and we want to support, of course, the National Health Service and try to keep the country safe.
Right.
But we will always do that in a respectful fashion.
All right, Sandy, look after yourself. Just think, I'm sure you're an extremely fit young woman. I wish you nothing but good health, but you might come across someone who's vulnerable, someone who's elderly. We must think as well. Sandy, be safe. Have a good weekend. James in Bishop Stortford, you're through to the Commissioner. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Nick, and good morning, Commissioner. I would like to ask the Commissioner, as a result of knife crime, 28 teenagers have been killed this year. How do you plan to combat this? And at some point, would you consider arming all officers with tasers, or at least giving them the opportunity to train with a taser, considering they protect both officers and members of the public?
Thank you very much indeed, James. So, first thing to say is that the deaths of the teenagers this year in murders, homicides, absolutely horrible. I've said before, I regard this as a stain on our city. Think of each and every one of them as a child, with a family, with a community. Usually, as you may know, James, the people who perpetrate the attacks are also children, and often in a group. So there's a whole swathe of people whose lives are completely wrecked by this horrible, horrible phenomenon. We have been working very, very hard against knife crime. In terms of knife crime generally, there's a decrease of over 30% when we compare it with 2019.
An increase in fatalities, of course,
a decrease in knife crime with injury of over 20%. A decrease in fatalities. A decrease in stabbings of young people under 25 of over nearly 30%.
Do I have to say again there's an increase? You're headed for the worst in 5 years.
I simply want to say, Nick, that if you think of the first category I talked about, that's 4,000 less victims. If you think of the third category I talked about, it's nearly 400 less victims of stabbing under 25 this year. We are seizing record numbers of knives. We're seizing, the guns are at the lowest rate of discharge since 2010. My officers are out there smashing up gangs, smashing up organised crime groups, and in the drugs markets. It's a horrible, horrible phenomenon.
I know how seriously they. So why do the numbers continue to increase of fatalities?
So. The Mayor was talking about this yesterday. I don't think anybody knows precisely. I think the phenomenon we are seeing, sadly, is a small number of very, very, very vicious attacks where people are even worse injured than they were in the past. These are, groups of young people, all armed with knives. And there's an enormous amount of work going on also in prevention to divert young people away from crime, to stop them from carrying a knife, to encourage families, schools, communities to stop people from carrying knives. I believe Nick, that we are absolutely doing the right things in policing and we are suppressing a great deal of the violence. It pains me horribly that we have had these homicides this year. And I'm intending, and we all pray that next year we don't have these. But it is a significant problem, and in particular in some communities.
Is this a post-pandemic surge?
No, I don't think it is.
Post-lockdown
no, I don't think it is. In fact, it was worse in the first half of this year, and indeed towards the end of last year, than it is in the second half of this year, as far as we can tell. So I won't go on about the figures, but you know how much effort we're putting in. You can see some huge improvements in every single violent crime type except the homicides. Robbery, it's down. Right, 13,000
I refer you to James's question.
Can I just talk about Taser for a second?
Of course, I was just going to say, can you refer to his point of Taser?
Absolutely.
I think your aim is to get Tasers in as many officers who choose to carry them.
So we currently have about 8,500 officers carrying Tasers. And by the end of next year, I'm expecting to have 10,000. So during my period in office, we have had a huge increase.
What does this do in the fight
Taser.
against fatal stabbings, though? Why would a Taser help?
Well, as James said, a Taser keeps the public safe on occasion, and it keeps officers safe as well. So having a Taser-trained officer in a situation where somebody is violent or is known to be a knife carrier and is threatening people can be extremely useful. In most cases, the Taser is not discharged. It's quite rare in London for a Taser to be discharged. In fact, in most cases, 77% of them, they aren't even drawn from the pocket. But in the most threatening situations, an officer with a Taser can have a fantastic impact very quickly at reducing something which is either has been very violent or is about to be very violent to safety. And so they are important. But James, I don't have a plan at the moment for every single officer to have a Taser.
Well, indeed, some would choose not to because, of course, they signed up before it was priced, so they might have to. Previous tactics as regards knife crime is that a borough has been chosen and effectively blitzed. Previous commissioners have flooded it with literally hundreds of police officers, cadets, everything they can think of. And we're going to own Croydon, and then we're going to go to Lambeth, whatever. Tactics like that don't appeal to you.
So I think we have more officers out on the streets dealing with knife crime than we ever have. That's for sure. We've got our violence suppression units, we've got our violent crime task force. There's thousands and thousands of officers, predatory offender units, all sorts of units. Number one priority for the Met. So we've got more officers. We're also bigger than we were in previous times, as you know. Not quite the biggest, but very nearly. And a high proportion of them are dealing with violent crime. And absolutely, we do take the ground. We are in the most violent places. We are in the drugs markets. We use intelligence. We are absolutely where we know there will or could be or has been violence. And we do flood the area. That's precisely what we do, yes.
And lastly, on the subject of knives, when I see the images, I find them truly chilling of some of the knives that your colleagues or your officers collect. There is a feeling among some other forces, Thames Valley, South Yorkshire, these images should no longer be posted on social media. And I think this was addressed at the London Assembly, and they asked the Met to stop sharing of knife imagery. Where are you on that, Commissioner?
They didn't actually ask yesterday, but I am fully aware that...
I thought Caroline Russell suggested that...
The question wasn't posed, but I'm familiar with the question. And
I'm so sorry. I thought she said, could you pause sharing images? My apologies. Perhaps it wasn't put forward.
There are some people who feel strongly that showing images may both frighten young people and make some young people more likely to pick up a knife. And there is some research going on into precisely that at the moment. We do sometimes show knives.
Why?
And
What's the
we
thinking?
do it to show... we generally do it where we're showing the officers in the course of their work. You may have seen a video, actually posted by a member of the public, but nevertheless, a video of an armed officer going onto a bus, dealing with somebody on the bus, coming out of the bus with a machete of about 12 or 14 inches long. Huge... recognition from the public. Thank God we're seeing the police doing their job. That's why people saying that's why they have to do stop and search. Thank God that knife's been taken off the street. That person's been arrested. So it reassures the public. Plus, they are informed about the nature of the threat that my officers, back to James's point, are dealing with. That helps them understand more why we have to use stop and search, why we sometimes have to taser people. I believe that having the awareness about knives is an easy thing to say, isn't it? And you can imagine, well, yeah, maybe a little flick knife, or maybe this, that, the other. No, my officers are up against machetes, hunting knives, horrific things which are only, I mean, yes, also flick knives and smaller knives. We need the public to understand that. And
so
also, in my view, raising awareness has helped change attitudes in communities and amongst policymakers. I am open, though, to the evidence. If there is good, strong evidence that ends up saying that this will actually encourage more teenagers to take up knives, then I'll look at that again. Of course I will, because it's a balanced judgment. It's a balanced judgment.
Okay. Yeah. James, thank you. Maria's in Brixton. You're through to Dame Cressida Dick. Go ahead, Maria. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Nick.
Hello.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
Following on from the Sarah Everard case, do you still think it's good advice for women to flag down a bus?
This is, of course, if a woman has stopped. It was advice given by one of the Commissioner's senior colleagues that they should possibly knock on a door, flag down a bus, or run to a nearby house. The Commissioner has subsequently addressed this, I have to say, at a meeting of the London Assembly. Remind everybody what you said there.
So Maria, this is an issue which, of course, was, as you say, raised hugely by the killing of Sarah, where we saw, lots of people would have seen the horrible video of somebody who was a serving police officer on the street abusing his position, his power. It appeared on the video to kidnap Sarah, and then we know what happened next. And so lots of people were saying to us, what should I do if I'm stopped by a plainclothes police officer? Now, there may be very, very, very rare occasions when somebody is stopped by a plainclothes police officer. It will be extremely rare. They might perhaps be off duty, for example, but most of our plainclothes police officers will be in pairs.
So some are still operating singly?
No, what I mean is if somebody's on the bus and they see something happen, any one of us might have to put ourselves on duty.
Off duty.
But plainclothes officers will normally be in pairs. They'll also normally be supported by uniform officers. And the point I would want to make is that all our officers were and are fully aware that some lone women, could be concerned if they're stopped by a man in plainclothes.
The idea is, do we wave down a bus?
So hence what we are saying to people now is that if you are concerned, the officer will want to explain themselves, they'll want to reassure you, they'll want to identify what they're doing, why they're there, who they are. If you remain concerned, then they can call the control room, and in effect you can speak to the control room and get reassurance that this is indeed a uniformed police officer.
So you don't call down a bus?
What my colleague was trying to explain was, if you are really terrified in any situation, get help. Right. And that, of course, remains true.
Did you have a word with your colleague, Assistant Commissioner Nick F. Grave, about his idea that you should either wave down a bus or run into a house, which I read as evade arrest? It is, isn't it? If one of your coppers stops me and I run away, isn't that called evading arrest, or have I got that wrong?
Nick, I think we should focus on the advice now, and me saying my officers want to understand how people may feel.
Okay.
They will treat people with respect. They will care. They will explain themselves, and you can ring the control room.
So it is party season. There will be young women making their way home. They may be stopped. I think this is Operation Safe Connection. A young woman, or indeed a young man, can say, I want to see your controlling officer, or whatever it might be, and they then have to make a phone call, just so I get the policy.
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine there could be a circumstance in which it is utterly impossible for the officer to do that. Because because if the person needs to be arrested right now because they're very violent, they've got a knife, we're not going to be saying,
right.
But that will be extraordinarily rare. The point is that a lone woman walking around the streets by herself should feel confident to talk to my officers. They will want to assist. We are seeing people coming up to police officers, every day of the week, every night of the week. You will see uniform officers more present in the nighttime economy. They are there to help women.
What are the likelihood that they're actually going to get arrested in violence if one of your officers has to ask him or herself 44 questions before they can deploy handcuffs, Commissioner?
So this is a media story gone mad.
Well, this is your opportunity. I'm only reporting that this was a new policy, a sort of ABC guide in a 25-page document, Commissioner.
So you might remember that last year there was some concern amongst some members of some communities about handcuffing, particularly in relation to stop and search. And partly because of that, and partly because I realised that some of our officers were probably not quite as confident in using handcuffs as I would like.
What's the point of Hendon if they're not confident?
Some of them were clearly, to me, not quite as confident as I would have liked. So we've launched a review to look at our policy, our practice, our guidance and everything else. Now, it's a good policy review. There's good guidance come out to the teams. Within it reminds officers that you are absolutely accountable. Any use of force, any use of power.
So they don't know this without a 26-page document? 25. What have they been doing in training college, Commissioner?
I recommend the whole document to you, Nick. I'm not sure if you've read it.
I haven't, but I've gratefully received a copy.
It's useful for our teams. It forms the basis of the training for the new officers. We retrain them very regularly in safety issues, as we do with things like taser, and we talk to them about use of powers, use of force, and of course, I was out with officers the other night doing stop search operations. They don't stand there and ask themselves 44 questions and make their mind up. Most of the questions will be completely subconscious or semi-conscious or not required.
So why do it?
But they are accountable.
Not required. Why do
they are accountable. They have to make a record, and it is useful for them when they are making a record, when they've dealt with something very instinctively, just like you running your programme. Much of it is instinctive. Much of it is semi-conscious. I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's a plan. I'm sure there's, you respond to what I say. This,
I
that,
wouldn't try
and
and
the other.
investigate.
And they must explain themselves afterwards. So these prompts, they can help them with that, and when they're new, it helps them think through the kinds of issues they should be thinking about before they use that kind of force.
Okay.
But it is not a requirement to ask 44 questions before you put handcuffs on. Of course it's not.
A police officer who asks me to keep his or her identity says, can you ask the boss, when did she last arrest someone? Has she ever put on handcuffs? I'm sure on a suspect, by the way.
Yes. Personally arrest someone? Not since I've been Commissioner. I've been present and helped with a number of arrests. I've been present and helped with a number of stop searches. I therefore have not personally handcuffed somebody for probably more than 5 years, certainly. Because
so you have applied handcuffs to the boss, but not since being the boss.
Yes.
All right, that's answered your question, sir or madam. Good luck with the work you do. Thank you for that. Let's go to another question. We've got another time for a couple of two, if we could. Lucy in Shepherd's Bush. This is an important one about anti-vaccine. Go ahead, Lucy.
Hi,
hello.
Why are anti-vaccine protesters allowed to harass and intimidate children on their way in and out of schools? Because I heard the Secretary of State for Education, Nadine Zaharia, tell Nick on this show that police would take action on this. So, given there's currently no law to keep protesters away from school, will you be arresting people who do this?
These are demonstrations which at the moment local authorities are loath to impose local guidelines or exclusion zones. And the newish Education Secretary, Nadine Zahawi, is saying that this actually is a job for police if these demonstrators are harassing, intimidating either children and or parents. Commissioner, is that what would, again, your advice be?
So, policing protests, as we've seen in all sorts of scenarios over the last few years, is always a delicate balance. And people do have the right to assemble and they have the right to express themselves freely. However, people do not have the right to commit criminal offences and to harass people criminally. And if that is happening, then we would hope that people would call us and we will deal with that. We can't be everywhere all of the time. So we will react, generally speaking. But if we are getting intelligence that there is likely to be a crime, if we get intelligence there's likely to be harassment, then of course we will want to assist. And schools across London have schools officers. We have very good intelligence systems. We are working closely with schools and indeed other institutions, hospitals and vaccination centres and goodness knows who, to try to keep in touch about protests.
Last two questions. The former top aide to Prince of Wales, Michael Fawcett, is reported did work with fixers to secure honours for a wealthy donor to his Prince's Foundation charity. There has been a letter gone into the Met to investigate. Can you update us on that investigation?
So we have received a letter, as you say. We have been making some initial inquiries. We have not launched an investigation. If people out there have further material for us, we will of course look at that if there's further evidence. But at this stage, having considered the letter, made some initial inquiries and examined the relevant legislation, some of which is in 1925 and some of which is the new Bribery Act, we have not launched an investigation.
There's an epidemic of drink spiking in universities across the country and in London. A word on that, and it must be of great concern, of course. If these people, if they're found, are breaking the law, we need to send a message out to these young people who seem to think it's some kind of sport. Commissioner?
Yes, I agree entirely. This is a horrible phenomenon. It's not a new one, Nick. You may even have discussed it with my predecessors. We've had campaigns against smoking, I can remember, in the noughties.
Yep.
We've had awareness raising. We've worked with licensees. All the things we're doing at the moment to try to encourage people, to keep an eye on their drink, to keep an eye on each other, to make sure that licensees do discharge their responsibilities to keep people safe. And, of course, if somebody reports it, for us to do a proper investigation. You described it, as an epidemic. We don't believe that we get told about all the incidents that there have been. Maybe sometimes people don't know. Maybe they don't think they're going to tell us for some reason. Perhaps they don't think it's worth it. We would want to hear about them. In 1 week, recently, we had, I think, 19 incidents. And yes, as you say, some people seem to think this is a sport. Some people think it's funny. Some people presumably are doing it, for the worst predatory kind of reasons. Either way, it's incredibly dangerous and a really horrible thing to do, and it very likely will be a crime, and we'll investigate it.
Finally, Christmas around the corner. Is there official Met guidance as regards parties and the restrictive numbers, or can each team decide what they want to do?
So we have...
I'm not inviting you to a Christmas party, by the way, Commissioner.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Indeed, the one the time occurs.
You've cancelled yours, what a shame. I know I'd have been there otherwise.
Indeed.
No, the Met throughout the pandemic has stuck very, very closely to the guidance. So that's what we're doing. We're sticking to the guidance. We have COVID-secure buildings. We are very clear with our people about where and when they should be wearing their masks for their own and other people's safety. We are very clear about our cleaning regime. We're clear about distancing.
So
and
Christmas gatherings are discouraged,
we have underlined that. I have not issued a missive saying no Christmas gatherings or no parties, but we'll keep a very close eye on the guidance and, of course, what happens in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Big thank you on behalf of everyone, of course, to the work that you've done, and I wish you and all your colleagues a safe and pleasant Christmas. Thanks to the efforts you and all the officers who serve under you put in, Dame Cressida.
Thank you very much indeed, Nick. They will be working very, very hard over Christmas, 24/7, 365, as you know, and not getting their Christmas dinner at the same time as other people, many of them. Thank you.
I know they don't. It's 8:35, LBC News headlines, then Thomas Watts.
The Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Dame Cressida Dick, has told Nick she recognises there's still work to do to restore trust in the service. An exclusive poll carried out for LBC says a third of young women in London distrust the Met. The concern